Hey everyone, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. Yesterday was a very sad date. It marked a 30 years anniversary of the signing of the Budapest Memorandum. And President Zelensky actually made an address in which he talked that not a single day that Budapest Memorandum worked. The Budapest Memorandum was an agreement for Ukraine to essentially give up their nuclear status, and Ukraine had a lot of nukes, incredible amounts of nukes. And it was decided that Ukraine either going to be pressured to give them the nukes, or they will submit the nukes willingly, and instead certain countries, I believe it was United States, United Kingdom, Russia, will guarantee Ukrainian independence and the sovereignty of their borders. That was the memorandum. Now, it wasn't like a proper agreement. If you read the text of the memorandum, it's pretty bad, but it had certain implications which I think we should definitely be aware of, and why violation of this memorandum is so crucial for our world and that we're living right now. Because the fact that that memorandum was signed off by one of the parties, like Russian Federation, that is supposed to respect the Ukrainian territorial borders, we are now in a situation when one of the signees of that memorandum is now actively going after the people, territory, and the statehood of Ukraine itself. And we hear a lot of the peaceniks, a lot of the calls for some kind of negotiated solution for this war. And they're stating the same claims. They're stating, like written here, just give up nukes and we'll guarantee your security. Just give up some land and we'll guarantee your security for real, for real. You see, these narratives, that's not something that can be trusted. And President Zelensky stated very clearly in his speech, he stated that there is no possibility for Ukraine to go forward and believe just some words and pieces of paper that are stating that they're going to guarantee their independence or security and so on. Ukraine is not some war-torn country. Ukraine was a proper European state. The fact that our mentality by this point switched so much that we cannot even imagine Ukraine as a country in peace is just ludicrous. There is not a single country in the world that wants peace more than Ukraine. So when we have certain people come up and say, well, why don't you just do this? Why don't you do that? When we hear journalists, why don't ask them, so on, Zelensky is very correctly asking, but how can we be sure that it's not going to happen again? Because it already did. And Zelensky outlined very clearly that there's only two paths for Ukraine to go. Either Ukraine becomes a nuclear power and they're able to secure their border by threatening annihilation to the attacker, which I'm pretty sure you can get who is going to be, or Ukraine is invited and joins NATO alliance. Nothing else. And if you are starting right now, it's like, oh, but Ukraine cannot join NATO. Then nukes. It's like, oh, but Ukraine cannot have nukes. Well, there is no other option. There is no option 3. It's not happening that way. The world has betrayed Ukraine. The world powers have absolutely betrayed the people and the legacy of Ukraine. And more importantly, it betrays the whole purpose and the spirit of the memorandum. While the memorandum itself is absolute garbage, the text of the memorandum is vague AF, and it doesn't guarantee anything besides essentially stating that we respect the Ukrainian country borders. The spirit of the memorandum is crucial, and I made a whole thread on the Blue Sky, and please follow me on Blue Sky if you can. I talked specifically about why, for us in the Western world, if the war in Ukraine ends with a ceasefire, why it will be a disaster, an absolute nightmare. And it is, in a large part, because of the Budapest Memorandum. What Putin is doing right now, he is creating a world order alternative. He wants to break that peace and prosperity that we had after the Second World War, that consensus where we understood that there shouldn't be aggressive changes of countries' borders, at least in Europe, at least where we could secure it. No, instead he creates the axis of evil to be a counterpart to it. He wants to drag us back into some kind of an alternative of a Cold War and take a rematch on that. Because remember, Putin has always said that the fall and collapse of the Soviet Union is the biggest geopolitical catastrophe in his mind. He wants to recreate that, and he is already on the way towards it. Ukraine, for him, is a proof of concept. The fact that they're forming the axis of evil is absolutely critical. That is why our response to that crisis, stating that we are not supporting Ukraine fully to win the war, instead we're treating this like some kind of a crisis to be managed. We are trying to drip feed Ukraine weapons just to make sure that Ukraine doesn't win too hard, because Russia can use nukes and we cannot do nuclear proliferation, we cannot secure. No, that is the whole point. That shows that we are weak. It absolutely proves the point, the concept that Putin wants to prove. He states that it is crucial that to say that the Western way of life cannot be the dominant way of living. It doesn't matter that you have 70 years of peace. What matters is that you are weak and we are strong, so we can challenge the way that you set up this world. So if you liked living in peace before, where you didn't have to spend a lot for your defense, where you didn't have to consider that potentially you might die in an aggressive war that's been brought upon you, all of that is going out. We're throwing that future for our kids and our grandkids completely out. So if we end this conflict, even in some kind of a negotiated solution, we're going to see the world in which Russia is not going to be reflecting on themselves. No chance for Russia to get rid of the dictatorship and Putin. The naive perspective that some of the Western leaders are painting, that suddenly, just suddenly, Russia is this country that gained a territory, that gained some victory, that Putin will definitely sell as a victory inside and will sell it as a victory to all of his partners. And we already hear from the United States that they're going to be lifting sanctions of Russia. That's a win. That's a win. Putin wins. So if this proof of concept is there, it means only one thing for all of the powers. The old world order is done. The new world order is in. The scenario for the future world is get nukes, invade your neighbors until finally Western powers stops pretending that they can do something, because the response will be negligible. It's either going to be response by Joe Biden that's going to drip feed just to prevent any kind of nukes. Oh, we're so afraid of nuclear war because, Ukrainians don't care if they're destroyed by nuclear weapons or they're destroyed by conventional weapons. Their cities look like rubble. Have you seen the cities that Russia left behind in Ukraine? Nothing different than the cities that look like post-nuclear weapons. Exactly the same thing. Ukrainians don't care if they're being destroyed by the nuclear weapons or they're destroyed by the Russian planes that the Western powers don't allow to shoot down. It doesn't matter for Ukraine. So if we end this in this negotiated solution, that's going to give the scenario and a playbook and a proof of concept. And for the other powers that were not planning an aggressive war, that means only one thing. Any and all security agreements that were done, null and void. Pieces of paper, absolute garbage, trash, because what these pieces of paper mean is what the Budapest Memorandum mean. Oh, we promise to secure your country's borders and respect and make sure that you're not going to get invaded. If you give up even the nukes, you help promote this non-nuclear world. Well, you know what it means is that when you get invaded, you'll have to go and beg like you are completely a beggar here. And it's us, like these big rich countries, that maybe are going to throw you a bone, one or two, but only if we will see that you're not going to be too aggressive or win too much. Oh, and you're gonna have to sacrifice all of your men, and then we're gonna try to educate you that you also need to send all of your future generation that would be there to rebuild your country, all your 18 to 23-year-olds. And we also are gonna be prohibiting you to fight and defeat their advances too much. And also that means that when we say respecting your borders, we're meaning that we're gonna take part of the territory that the enemy advances occupied, and then we're going to force you, by not giving you the weapons, to negotiate and give that territory to the aggressor. That is what security agreement where we respect your international borders mean. Oh, of course we're not gonna recognize it, and then we're gonna hope that potentially the aggressor is gonna die, and then the territories are just gonna return. That's how diplomacy works. No, it's definitely not gonna create the axis of evil and completely destroy the narratives that we're building before. Absolutely not. It's absolute sarcasm. It's absolute garbage what is being sold to us here. We are creating a world where both the attacking powers must get nukes and the defending powers must get nukes if they want to have at least some security. And don't bother with any kind of cooperation or trusting the Western powers, because they're going to be either the Joe Biden's way or the Trump's way, which is even fucking worse, where they just say it's like, America first, we only care about ourselves, you guys don't really matter to us that much. If it's inconvenient for us to not trade with Russia, we're not going to be bothered. We're just going to continue doing what we want. Because that is exactly what the Kit Kellogg's plan for Ukraine is. It's literally called America First, Plan for Russia and Ukraine, where he blames that, it was a wrong by Joe Biden to try to isolate Russia. It was wrong that we're trying to be too hostile to Russia. What is relevant is to make sure that we open some kind of a talks for Russia, and we do not respect any kind of agreements that were happening before. Instead, we purely operate on what is good for America. Absolutely critical. So while at first, and from what I've heard about Kit Kellogg is good, a lot of these statements do not involve me really being super optimistic about this plan, especially when we're looking in some of the inside knowledge of this plan. When he's talking about, I'm not even going to bother explaining that it's going to be over 1 million people that require to secure some kind of demilitarized zone between Ukraine and Russia. No, what it talks about is potentially lifting the sanctions of Russia to essentially start some kind of a negotiation process, open up, start discussing for Ukraine potentially to give up some of their land, and everything that I discussed before essentially be enacted. Like, forget any kind of agreements. All is garbage. Budapest Memorandum, trash. Security agreements, trash. US doesn't find you attractive anymore. Fuck you. You don't matter. America first. That is the world that is now being created by our politicians. That is the world that we're trying to sell to us Europeans. That is the world that we're trying to propose here to Ukrainians. And that is exactly why I truly feel that if this conflict is going to end up in a negotiated solution, it's going to be potentially good for Ukrainians. They will stop dying. Maybe they will accept it in their society. Maybe there will be potentially possibility for some kind of diplomacy to work, and potentially Russia to finally return some of these lands to Ukraine. But for the world order, for peace, for our living, for my children and grandchildren and their future, we're going to leave the world that will know no peace. And that is a disaster. Thank you so much for hearing me out. I really want this message to be heard. That's why I'm asking everyone, please write this message with certain arguments. I hope I gave you enough firepower so you can maybe reach out to your direct representatives, write them a mail, let them know. It's crucial. And most importantly, please continue supporting Ukrainian armed forces, because whatever happens, the more we help, the more lives we saved. Ukrainians didn't choose this. Ukrainians want only one thing: live in peace. Help me support them. Help Ukrainians fight. I love you. Slava Ukraini. Trust in Ukrainian armed forces. And I'll see you next time.